A lot to get through. 49ers, several new roster decision possibilities coming out of the game in LA against the Chargers. An injury update because we've got a list of players who might be missing some practice time. And the 49ers, just over a week from now, will be cutting their 90-man roster down to 53. Now, a year ago yesterday, the 49ers traded for Sky Moore. A year ago today, the 49ers traded for Brian Robinson. As we sit here on August 22nd, 2026, it is, I think, very possible that the 49ers trade some players away and maybe even acquire somebody, but obviously will all depend on how all the chips line up. But we can go through the injury update and really take a look at the entire roster. I also want to go through some of the roster cut down techniques that the 49ers will employ once they do have to trim this down to 53 men. The biggest questions for me are who makes this roster on defense, and is anybody going to be floated around as trade bait on the defensive side of the ball, particularly the players whom the 49ers drafted under Robert Saleh before Raheem Morris was with the team. So you look at somebody like Alfred Collins, you look at somebody like Nick Martin. We have to know exactly what Raheem Morris personnel package preference is going to be in that front seven. Mike has a few players who he's not sure about. He thinks that Nick Martin and Alfred Collins are obviously the top of the list defensively. And then we're not sure who's going to win that left guard competition for the 49ers. As I move to an injury update, it's important to note that Robert Jones is likely going to miss this week. Robert Jones had been taking first team reps for the 49ers at left guard. So now Carver Willis, who started the game for the 49ers on Thursday because of the Robert Jones injury, I'm guessing when I head out to practice today, Carver Willis is going to be still in that first team role. But the 49ers say that Connor Colby is still competing. A fourth player entered that mix in Austin Pleasance over the course of the past week, but he got hurt. He hurt his knee against the Chargers, which means that a four-person battle at left guard is now down to a two-person battle between Willis and Colby. So is left guard a position where the 49ers might make a trade? In 2017, they made a trade for Laken Tomlinson at right around this time of the year. A little bit later, but he was in the starting lineup by week 2 for the 49ers, and he played that left guard position. So the 49ers have a history of trading for a guard when they've needed one, especially at that left guard position right before the season starts. I think Kevin Zeitler is still a free agent. I don't know if he fully matches what Chris Furster and Kyle Shanahan want system-wise. I know that Joel Bitonio matched what they wanted system-wise. I suspected that they wanted to convince him to not retire and have him play for them this year, but obviously he did retire after a nice long career over a decade long with the Cleveland Browns. Bitonio's first year with Cleveland was with Kyle Shanahan as the offensive coordinator. That's why we pulled out that clip earlier this offseason of him praising the Shanahan system. So you look at holes on this roster, and you look at the 49ers history. Last year, they had a hole at punt returner, so they traded for Sky Moore. They had a hole at running back 2, so they traded for Brian Robinson Jr. This year, the 49ers have, I think, punt returner on its way to being filled. Jacob Cowing had the 83-yarder for a touchdown in Los Angeles, and that was something that Kyle Shanahan said he made the job or the decision for the 49ers a whole lot easier. So that was an indication that Jacob Cowing is going to take that punt returner job. Probably not signed, sealed, and delivered yet. They have running back 2 filled. We saw Kalon Black, the rookie. We can shade him in green here as a rookie. Saw Kalon Black deliver for the 49ers on Thursday in LA, so you don't have to worry about trading for a running back 2. They, I think, have filled up the receiver room nicely. Now, you could say, hey, they don't have Ricky Pearsall anymore, so they still need a Z receiver. But I don't see anybody out there capable of starting for the 49ers at a reasonable trade price at wide receiver. So I think that you're going to have to find a way to make things work with Jordan Watkins, Deebo Samuel, Jacob Cowing, and Demarcus Robinson. We'll see about Christian Kirk, and we're going to go through some of the roster maneuvers that the 49ers might make. Tight end, I think that the 49ers actually feel good about where they're at the tight end position this year, especially if George Kittle doesn't even have to go on PUP to start the season. That leaves the one hole on offense, since you're comfortable with 4 of the 5 positions right now, the one hole as left guard. And that's the one that Kyle Shanahan even said that nobody has made this completely easy on us. So, translation of that, if you want to put it into blunt terms, is that the 49ers are very, very worried about that left guard position. So, in last year's terms, you needed a running back too. You needed a punt returner this year. I think you need a left guard, and your potentially expendable pieces now fall on the side of the football where you've had a coordinator change. You've seen a major schematic evolution, and you have inserted a lot of new talent in both of the past 2 seasons. You could go back even the past 3 seasons, but the past 2 seasons have been heavy on the defensive investment of youngsters for the 49ers. They also stand to return Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, 2 of their veteran older players. And now we get to figure out exactly who they value and who they don't, because if you just look at the structure of this roster, I'm going to highlight the defensive line room. They might have a glut, and that is an overflow of defensive tackles all of a sudden. This to me is fascinating because how many defensive tackles can you actually carry on your 53-man roster? James Thompson Jr. and Bryson Eason were the 2 of the 49ers' highest graded players on Thursday night in LA, the 2 undrafted free agent defensive tackles. I think they brought back Evan Anderson just to fill a rotation with CJ West and Grayson Halton. We can put the injury shade on Grayson Halton as well. So I don't think that Evan Anderson has a chance of making this 53-man roster, but I certainly think that James Thompson Jr., Bryson Eason, and Sebastian Valdez do. I think that Thompson might even be ahead of Valdez at this point based on the performance that we saw the other night. And assuming that CJ West and Halton are not long-term injuries, and I don't think they are, when you pair that with Osa Odigizua and one of these undrafted free agents making the roster, all of a sudden you've got 5, also counting Alfred Collins. That's why Alfred Collins is in a pressure-packed situation here, I think, entering the final preseason game, because it's not a sure thing that he's one of the 49ers' best 4 defensive tackles. He hasn't been playing like it over the course of the first 2 preseason games. At edge rusher, things are a little bit different because Mykel Williams is almost certainly going to be out for the start of the season. We don't expect him back for week 1. Probably going to be on PUP, which means that he's going to miss at least 4 games to start the season. So Bosa, obviously working back from the knee tendonitis. Romello Height, I think, is going to need Bosa. He's going to need a bookending edge rusher. He hasn't yet to deliver pressure in the preseason. I don't think that you can count on him to deliver it himself. We're waiting for Keon White to start taking team snaps. That's given a lot of shine to guys like Okawanu and Okoronkwo, who are depth pieces. 49ers definitely thinner at defensive end. I don't think you worry as much about a glut of options there just because it doesn't exist. But a defensive tackle, a problem, so to speak, that you didn't have last year might be there. The other position that is, seems to be teeming with talent right now for the 49ers, but teeming with unproven talent and new look talent as far as the measurables go is linebacker. And it's fascinating because Nick Martin has actually put on some intriguing tape as far as his speed, and he's got a great speed size muscle combination. I shouldn't say size. He's got a great speed strength combination, but he doesn't have the size part of it. He's been awesome on special teams, I think, for the 49ers, but defense, it's been hit or miss for him. I mean, he's explosive, but there was that penalty in week 1 against the Titans. There still have been some over-aggressive angles from Nick Martin. He's gotten a lot of first-team reps at the strong side linebacker position, but it's much more specialized now that the 49ers are only running a 4-3 part of the time, and then they're going into more of a 5-man front, 3-4 alignment where they want those bigger linebackers. So somebody who's been an absolute firework offensive with athleticism for the 49ers at linebacker is also not a match with the other physical prototypes that they have at the position. Somebody like Jaden Duggar, somebody like Larry Worth, somebody even like Jalen Graham looks a whole lot different than a Nick Martin. Martin and Tatum Bethune are built much differently than the newer linebackers whom the 49ers have brought in. So there's no telling at this point which way this is going to break ahead of next week's roster cut down, and it's coming on Sunday. But those are two of the like, if I'm going to circle two pieces who I really want to know what the 49ers defensive coaching staff has in mind right now for them, it would be Nick Martin and it would be Alfred Collins. And you could see when you look at that roster how we could look at them as the odd man out, or if the 49ers do keep them on this 53, well, there would be some interesting packages, especially with Nick Martin. Right now, they're running something called Buffalo on the defensive side of the ball with Martin. That's he would always run in when they call Buffalo. So there's a place for somebody with that kind of strength and speed, with that combination of strength and speed. The question is, does that place fit in with what Raheem Morris is planning? Not just looking at the 49ers when they're practicing against themselves in training camp, but once they start game planning for the Rams and for the entirety of this 17-game schedule as they move forward. I do want to set some of the expectations of maneuvers for the 49ers when it comes to this final week. So I put this up on X last night, and I will toss it onto the screen for everybody right now. So hopefully you can read along with me. If you're driving, don't do that. I could go through it. But with cut down coming up on Sunday, the 49ers are going to have to keep this under 53 players on their 53-man roster. If you go to my roster right here, the one that I just showed you, I technically have 55 players making it. I might even add a couple more. It might be 57 or even 58, probably 56 or 57 by the time that Sunday comes. So you say, well, how the hell are they going to fit 56 or 57 guys on the 53-man roster? And the answer is the 49ers are going to have 3 tools at their disposal with roster machinations that you need to know about right now so you understand what they're doing, because some of this may actually stretch over the course of a couple days. One, the 49ers have the PUP list. The PUP list is the physically unable to perform list, which has already been set. So they cannot add players to it, but they do have players on it. I keep track of the PUP list for you guys right here. George Kittle, Michael Williams, and Isaac Guerendo are currently on the physically unable to perform list. The only way that you get on the PUP list is if you're on there at the start of training camp. Once you practice, you're off of it. You can't go back on it, and you can't add somebody to it right now, even if well, I guess if they haven't practiced, you could technically add them to it. But every single player on the 49ers roster outside of these guys and Brandon Ayuk, obviously, has practiced for the 49ers this year. So the PUP, if a player stays on PUP past the cut down, stops counting against the roster spot. So the 49ers can save roster spots technically with Kittle, with Michael, and with Isaac Guerendo. We do not expect George Kittle to start the season on PUP at this point. I think it's more likely that he doesn't, even if he misses the game in Australia against the Rams. So the other 2 candidates, unless Kittle's a surprise PUP remainder for the 49ers, are Michael Williams, who I expect to remain on PUP, and Isaac Guerendo. So if I project both Michael and Guerendo to be in the 49ers 53-man picture, as I do right here, but they both go to PUP, that means that the 49ers have effectively kept them as part of this team without them counting against that roster. The only downside is that they have to miss at least 4 games on PUP, but that's something that I think the 49ers will happily trade off. I even think that Guerendo might be close to healthy, but because the 49ers want to preserve a roster spot and have him available for later in the season, it might be smart for them to keep him on PUP so that they do have that open 53 spot and then the flexibility of bringing Guerendo back in week 5. Second tool for the 49ers are return from IR designations. So players who have already practiced for the 49ers but are hurt, the 49ers can say at the cut down, they can pick 2 of them, and they can say, this guy is going to injured reserve, but we don't want his season to be over, because typically if you put somebody on injured reserve before they make the 53-man roster, they can't come back that year. So they can put these players on injured reserve with a designation to return with the caveat being that they need 4 games out minimum, just like the pup list, so they can come back week 5. We will see what the 49ers injury situation looks like a week from now. But at the moment, I'm looking at guys like Christian Kirk. If the 49ers have any interest in keeping him around, because he practiced once and then he hurt the calf. So obviously he's not eligible for pup. I am looking at somebody like Brett Toth, who had concussion issues last year and continues to deal with a concussion issue this season. He's been out with a concussion here for a couple weeks. And obviously somebody who I think the 49ers would want healthy to compete at both left guard and be their backup center. But if he's not ready week 1 and the 49ers don't have much hope that he's going to be ready in the first 4 weeks, a return from IR designation is entirely possible. We'll also keep our eyes on Robert Jones, who is out right now for at least a week, it sounds. Doesn't sound like a 4 or 5 week injury, so probably not a candidate for something like that. But this is yet another roster tool the 49ers can use to carry specific players, yet not have them count against the 53. The final, and this always seems to trick people this year, it's the third football here on the list, is the release and re-sign trick. So this will happen with a veteran who's on a minimum contract. It's not going to happen with somebody who has guaranteed money, because that would just turn into dead money and it would be messier. But somebody on a minimum contract without guaranteed money, you come to agreement. It's like a backroom handshake deal with that player that you're going to release him but re-sign him the next day after you move somebody else to injured reserve. The idea being that once a player makes the 53-man roster, they can go on IR and be eligible to return after 4 games. But to conserve roster space, sometimes you'll go up to a vet and say, hey, we're going to re-sign you tomorrow. Don't go sign with anybody else. We'll take care of you. But we need to get this guy through to the 53 who's hurt. And then we need to put him on IR. And once we put him on IR, there's going to be an open spot and we'll re-sign you again the next day. The 49ers have done this every single season. Every single team does it every single season. It tricks fans every year because they're like, why the hell did they release this guy? But they just bring him back the very next day. So next Sunday, I guarantee you there's going to be at least one of these. 49ers are going to release somebody, but they'll re-sign him the next day because they're going to move somebody to IR. I can't tell you who it's going to be. I can't tell you who they're going to move to IR because we still have a week of practice and we still have a game to cover against the Raiders on Thursday. So guys can get hurt. Guys probably will get hurt. It's football between now and then. And then the 49ers are going to sit down on Saturday and Sunday when they make these cuts, and they're going to decide how to take this right here, a 90-man roster, cut it to 53. I have 55 guys on the left side of the dividing line right now. How are they going to fit more than 53 guys into 53 spots? And they're going to try to use the tools at their disposal that I've listed right here in order to do that. So this is where roster Tetris is going to start to come in. Now, the one key behind everything is that, again, I'm going to emphasize this, the player must make the initial 53 to be eligible to return from injured reserve. So either PUP is eligible to return, but you can't make the PUP list any bigger. That was set at the start of training camp, or injured reserve post cut down is eligible to return. And you have 2 spots that you can, subvert that post cut down rule with, 2 return from IR spots. The one limiting factor behind everything is that only 8 players total can be designated to return from an injury list, be it IR or PUP, over the course of the entire regular season. So you can't just go willy-nilly with this and put everybody on IR and be like, okay, well, this is how we keep 60 to 65 players, because you're only going to be able to return a total of 8 from IR, and that is all regular season. If you make the playoffs, you get 2 more return spots. So if that's confusing to you, if you need to read up on it a little bit more, it's on my X. If you have any questions about it, go ahead and send those to me. And of course, another way for the 49ers to make roster room, to have more spots on that 53 open, is to trade somebody away. A year ago at this time, the 49ers traded for Sky Moore and Brian Robinson Jr., but they've traded away at this time as well somebody like Tatum Bethune, for example. Robert Saleh might want Tatum Bethune if he's not going to make the 49ers 53-man roster. And sometimes you could really trade these guys away for a nominal cost, like a 7th-round pick swap. The 49ers, They had a linebacker. I'm trying to remember his name. It's escaping me. He went to the Denver Broncos, though, around 2022. And it was a linebacker who, man, Mike, if you remember the linebacker's name when the 49ers traded to the Broncos in 2022, you'll be a hero. But he intercepted a pass against the 49ers later that season. It was in week 2 or week 3 when they played in Denver. His name is escaping me. But the whole point was that the 49ers were able to run a pick swap, and they got a better Jonas Griffith. Mike comes through, saves the day here. Jonas Griffith, good-looking linebacker for the 49ers, didn't fit into a really crowded linebacker room. It was a 7th-round pick swap with Denver, and the 49ers actually got Dakota Watson, I believe, via trade, or they traded him away. Also a 7th-round pick swap, another outside linebacker type. But these have been maneuvers that the 49ers have made at the bottom of the roster ahead of trade cutdowns. So something like that is entirely possible if they feel that that's going to open up a spot for this football team, or if they could just improve some late-round draft positioning. And then something a little bit more substantive is possible for the 49ers as well. Nick Martin trade would probably be more substantive because that's a player who still has 3 years of team control and has actually been an electric mover out on the field. I don't think Brant Boyer would agree with such a trade. I think he would really love Nick Martin in on special teams with what he brings, but we don't know exactly what Raheem Morris is going to want when they cut down this roster. Obviously, Alfred Collins would be the most interesting, but I think he's got to put better play on tape than he has over the first 2 preseason games, if he even would be somebody that could fetch some sort of return for the 49ers. The thing about Collins, though, is that he was a 2nd-round pick. He's got a lot of size. There could be different schemes that want more length on the inside at defensive tackle. I think the 49ers are probably going for more stoutness there now, which is why I wonder about James Thompson Jr., too, at 6'6" for San Francisco. It seems that Eason, C.J. West, Osa Digazua, those types, Sebastian Valdez, the Hulk, seems that those types of players fit more of what the 49ers need from a run defense standpoint. But it's all going to be one big symbiotic puzzle for San Francisco in that front 7. All 11 have to stop the run, and they have to do a better job than they did last year. All right, I'm going to answer some of your questions. Practice today at 1:50 down at the team facility. Oh my gosh, we got Australian money coming in. That's awesome. Thoughts on trading for Highsmith, Alex Highsmith and Jesse Bates before the deadline? I'm much more bullish on something happening before the deadline for the 49ers in terms of a splashier acquisition than I am right now. I think you're either selling off pieces that don't fit, or you're bringing in, or like 7th-round picks right now, right? You're running pick swaps. Let's put it that way. But at this point of the year, or you're trying to fill very, very specific holes, but usually with pieces that aren't going to make that massive of a splash. Last year was almost exceptional. And I don't know if Brian Robinson Jr. was a massive splash, but I remember that people were really, really excited about it last year with Brian Robinson Jr. But it was 2 players who were going to play significant snaps for the football team at this time. Even though the 49ers didn't have to spend a whole lot, what was it, 6th-round pick, I think, for Sky Moore, and a 6th-round pick, or was it even it might have even been a swap for Sky Moore. And then for Brian Robinson Jr., those, just from a balance sheet perspective, were not massive transactions, but they obviously drew a lot of fan interest for San Francisco. If you bring in an Alex Highsmith from Pittsburgh, Jesse Bates from Atlanta, those would obviously be splash trades. I think splash trades are a little bit more likely before the deadline, which isn't until November, because of the fact that teams like Pittsburgh and Atlanta also have aspirations this year, and they don't necessarily want to go on a fire sale right now. So it's guys who don't fit the roster that are probably going to be moved. So unless Atlanta thinks that Jesse Bates no longer fits, I think that a more likely time for a trade of Jesse Bates is a little bit closer to the deadline. Also, the 49ers are going to have to get a read of what exactly they need. Just because the 49ers had a practice where they gave up a few bigger plays against the Chargers the other day doesn't mean that they're going to trade for multiple All-Pros to try to desperately fill holes on defense. The truth is that we don't firmly know exactly how the 49ers are going to run defensively under Raheem Morris once they start game planning. We don't know how efficient they're going to be defensively. I mean, we're in the fog of war, and so are the 49ers in so many ways because they have to test what they plan to run out against other teams. They have to make adjustments. So until you actually get through some of the regular season and you see where those specific weaknesses are, you see some injuries develop, you see how the league is attacking you, you don't really know firmly what you need back on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's obvious that the 49ers would like to further settle their left guard position because it doesn't matter what schematically is happening around the league and how teams are attacking them to know that you want to make sure that left guard is solidified. But in terms of safety, something that is so tied to the pass rush, and they didn't have a pass rush last year because everybody was hurt. I think you need some data points there to figure out exactly what you need on the backside of the defense. If I was the GM, what trade would I try to make? Try to get Joel Bitonio to come out of retirement and play that left guard for San Francisco. I think that, anything that you could swing for another defensive end could be very helpful for the 49ers. If you could send Collins somewhere with a lower round pick for a proven defensive end, I think that would be very beneficial to the 49ers, but I don't know if that's possible. I think that I would have to sit down with Raheem Morris and tell him, hey, I know you've been talking a lot in the press conferences about how everybody fits and, but honestly, who is expendable for you? Is Alfred Collins expendable? Is Nick Martin expendable? Those are just the two that were drafted under Saleh that I wonder about. And then I would sit down with Brant Boyer and I would say it would be okay if, so-and-so team is interested in this player. Is he expendable? And is he expendable if I bring you an edge rusher? If I bring you Alex Highsmith from Pittsburgh, would that work? I would have to confer with the coaching staff, but I'm just giving you guys the most likely position groups to look at. Last year, they were punt returner and running back 2. This year, the focus has shifted to left guard, and then it's also shifted to defensive tackle and defensive end just because the 49ers have a weird, different kind of misbalance at defensive line with more tackles than ends at this point. And Alfred Collins, I think, not looking as good as the 49ers. I think he's looked like the 49ers' 5th best defensive tackle, which is interesting because you might only have 4 in the rotation. Maybe you have more this year because of the different alignments and the 5-man fronts, but that's why I would need to have a long, hard, honest conversation with the 49ers coaching staff about what exactly they want, and we shall see what they want in about a week. You enjoy the collab with Uncle Sherm. Yeah, we'll have to promote that a little bit more, but it's up on Richard Sherman's YouTube page. We're going to be doing that more this season, so go and check out the Richard Sherman podcast. We went for about 45 minutes yesterday. I'm still not fully in on Cowing as a receiver, but I'm definitely in on him as a returner. I mean, after what he did yesterday, I haven't seen a 49ers punt return since 2011 in a regular season game. I don't think we've seen one in a preseason game either. So for a touchdown. So here's the thing. I think that they're playing Cowing out of position in this preseason intentionally because I think that there is a competition going on with Jordan Watkins. And I don't think that Cowing's an outside receiver. I don't. I think Cowing is a slot guy and a gadget weapon offensively. That's fine, especially if you're the punt returner. That's fine. I think he struggled, and I think we saw it the other night. I don't think that he's a legitimate outside the numbers target because he doesn't have enough height for that. And again, that's okay. But if and when this roster is made with Jacob Cowing on it, then they're going to have to, if they want him to be an offensive contributor, they're going to have to carve out an inside receiver role or a gadget role. And maybe Deebo Samuel is going to have the vast majority of work in that particular job. So maybe Jacob Cowing is just not going to be used on offense, which again is something the 49ers have already done. There's precedent for that. Sky Moore wasn't really used until they were down to a skeleton crew at wide receiver. So I think the 49ers are willing to carry Jacob Cowing, even if he's just a punt returner and just receiver depth. I think they would prefer if their punt returner was a major piece of the offense. And maybe they can involve Jacob Cowing in a gadget kind of way with some of the sweeps and the pitches and some specialty inside receiver stuff. I just don't think that at 5'9", he's an outside guy for the 49ers. These are all questions, guys, that are going to be answered. It's so exciting that the cut down is coming up because we're going to get firm answers to what the 49ers actually think about these things once the cut down happens. So that's why I love going through this roster with you, keeping this updated on a daily basis. I'll update it again after practice today. This is why I do these shows where we go through every single position group, where we try to cover things as thoroughly as possible. And then we can understand what the 49ers are thinking, because it's a real tough push and pull with only 53 roster spots available. Is Bosa good for week 1? That's what they're shooting for. I think he's on track for that right now. Debo and Trent leading the 49ers out, and again with the beanbox. The boom box fits so much better. I mean, it feels like old times, and that's one area where nostalgia will definitely be allowed. You need the best burrito. I would recommend, I mean, there's a debate, but I would recommend Taqueria Cancun at 19th and Mission. So Bethune is another one that I have questions about just because of fit with Raheem Morris. I don't disagree with you. I think that he played well in the preseason. I think that a lot of guys made excellent plays, but not everybody's going to make the 53-man roster. This is a really personal decision for a defensive coordinator because the Mike linebacker has the radio in his helmet. Garrett Wallow is competing with Tatum Bethune for the backup Mike linebacker position. Does Morris prefer Wallow for that job? Does he prefer Bethune? I don't think that you're going to have 3 Mikes on this 53-man roster. I mean, if you want to look at this specifically, and again, I don't know, but right now I've got Wallow over Bethune. I also have Gifford making the team. Maybe, oops, I didn't mean to erase Wallow there, but I didn't mean to. I don't know if Gifford's going to be one of the 6. I would think that Brant Boyer wants a special teams Pro Bowler to come back, but maybe the 49ers won't have room for him. It's, they could carry 5. They can carry 6 linebackers. I don't think they carry 7. Larry Worth might earn a spot for San Francisco, or they'll say, Larry Worth, we think we can get him through to the practice squad. And we can't treat it as only a 53-man roster plus the pup spots and the IR spots. We also have to think about this as 53 plus a 17-man practice squad. I think that's really important to contextualize in that way as well. So it's going to be a balance of who can you expose the waivers, who don't you want to expose the waivers, who can you convince to re-sign with you after a day so you can IR some guys, and they're going to be out for 4 weeks, and then, you only have 8 return from IR designations. There are many things that you have to think about if you're the 49ers. Saying that Osa is going to have a hell of a year. I agree. All right, guys, time for me to shortly head down to that team facility. I got to get a couple more things done. Wanted to give you guys the trade season update. That's what you need to look out for now over the course of the next week. Probably not mega deals, but you could see some sales. You could see the 49ers try to really target a specific position of need like they did last year at this time. And, of course, you're going to see some roster maneuvers for the 49ers. And Osa had a hell of a debut for the 49ers in that preseason game against the Chargers. We'll see you all at the team facility. Everybody take care.